If you're here, you're probably looking for a way to level up your character art with dynamic and more natural looking poses, but don't know where to start. So I'm going to show you how to draw any character in any pose by breaking down the anatomy with this easy mapping method. As an animator, I prefer using screenshots from videos as references because the motion feels just a little bit more natural. Then I'll show you how to deconstruct the reference and apply the pose to any of your characters. Just like how I'm about to show you how I took Guerrero from the Toronto Blue Jays and turned him into Spider-Man. Okay, so speaking of deconstructing, I'm gonna find the gesture line. And I guess going over like gesture lines, what I like to look for sometimes is kind of roughly the top of the head and then where the feet are. So this pose is great because like his feet are together, or at least in this angle, the feet are together, and it creates such a clean kind of line here. And what works too in our favor is we can also see kind of like the buttons of his shirt, and we can also see like this kind of like where his legs are split over here. So it gives us a very clean track for where the gesture line could be. What about the baseball bat? I actually think this is a really cool gesture line. That actually can also be another gesture line. So this could be gesture line 2, but I would say stick to one or the other. Don't try to use both of them because the gesture line should almost be like an impression, a summary of how you are viewing the pose. So in my opinion, I personally prefer gesture line 1 a little bit more. So I'm going to use this one to guide my drawings. So what this line is, it's really trying to summarize the overall pose. So that's why I like to look for where the top of the head is and the feet, and it just so happens that the buttons of the shirt and the divide between the legs creates a nice flow from the head to the feet. But it's not me trying to map out the spine or the sternum or the perfect middle of the body. So just to clarify that, because that's the biggest mistake or the misconception that a lot of people make the first time they do figure drawing. The line of action really is to just capture how the body is moving. So just keep it simple, keep it one simple line. Sometimes it'll be a C curve, a really sharp C curve, and sometimes it can be an S curve. So I'm drawing all the way starting from the head through into the legs. And the reason why we do this is because it creates a nice cleaner line and a much smoother trajectory. Whereas if you try to lock in your lines from here to here, it'll be a little stiffer. Sometimes you might end it at the wrong spot or start it at the wrong spot. So it's always a good idea to practice drawing through your objects so you get a nice, clean, smooth line. And then we're going to change the trajectory and look at how the hips are kind of moving. So I'm going to start a little bit higher than the waist, and I'm going to go all the way to maybe like the half of the leg. So this gives us our pinch. Let's start with the bottom. I'm going to kind of mark it a little bit above the crotch area. And if you're like, oh, I don't know where the bottom of the crotch area is, there's a few context clues for us here. We have the belt, and we have a little bit of like this shadow forming right here. So what that tells me is that the area right above the crotch, or like the bottom of the pelvis, is gonna be somewhere here. So we're gonna cut it off. And then the shoulder, we're gonna have to cheat a little bit. So I'm gonna follow the shoulder up to its highest point, and I'm gonna look at where the other shoulder is. So hopefully this is showing you I'm kind of mapping out the different angles and points of plane changes that are happening in the torso. So now we're going to connect the two, and this gives us our torso. So if you take away the reference, this is the torso that we're getting. So now that we have the torso broken down, gonna do the arms now. Again, gonna map out where the shoulder is in the center of the shoulder. Then I'm gonna look for where the center of the trajectory line, and look for the wrist and trajectory line, and do the same thing. Now we can't really see the other elbow, but you know, the other elbow is kind of hidden behind, and the other elbow looks like it's around here. So remember, I'm kind of looking at where the center of the forearm would be and where the center of the upper arm would be, and that kind of tells me where the center core of the elbow is. So if you have a little bit of trouble figuring out where the elbow is, and you kind of remember me going like, it's not at the point of the elbow, it's in the middle, push it a little bit more into the middle. A good way of thinking about where to put it is the elbow should kind of line up with where the center of your forearm is and where the center of your upper arm is. I'm gonna deconstruct the hands, not gonna draw the details of the hands, but more of the shape of it. And then we're gonna draw the arm. For this one, I'll show you how I would draw a more three-dimensional arm. So you can have a cylinder that is like this. You can make it very wonky. Even though this looks wonky, it looks bad, this is totally gonna work on your figure drawing. And then if I draw it bigger and I draw another one and I just copy the curve that I have here onto here, I make it look more like a cylinder. It's more about how big you make the diameter of the ellipse rather than how accurate you draw it. In the grand scheme of things, it's so tiny that it doesn't really matter too much. So it's not so much about like how accurate or how like perfectly drawn the cylinder is. It's more about like afterwards when you look at this, can you rebuild the pose with the information that you have? Okay, and then this arm in the back, it is actually not, we don't really see too much of it, so it's gonna be just a flat one. And then again, I'll just show you the flat version of how to draw the legs. Again, we'll put the joint here, put the knee here, and then we'll put the ankle here. And then for the legs, I'll do it in the simple version. So this is the version where you don't have to worry about the cylinders and the perspective of it. But what I would focus on is making sure that your limbs, one is wider and one is more narrow. I'm not trying to perfectly fit it inside of the leg. I'm really just trying to make sure that I can kind of map it out and block it in so that when I observe this, I can see what it is that I'm drawing. And then the head. So the head, I personally like this approach when drawing heads, is to not draw it like a circle, but more draw it as a rectangle. And I like to put the rectangle to align with the face. So when you do mannequin breakdowns like this, like look at this, wow, I followed the picture and the pose perfectly, and then you take away the reference and you're like, why does that look weird? That doesn't look right. I traced it perfectly though. Why does it look odd? And that's just because what you're seeing is realistic human proportions, and realistic human proportions just aren't as beautified as we are more familiar with seeing. If you're feeling like trying this exercise for yourself, I got you. I put together a character posing starter kit, complete with worksheets full of inspo and 3 pose references, as well as a cheat sheet for, if you get stuck. You can get it for free in the description below, and if you complete the exercise, I would love to see it. Join our Discord to share your progress and connect with other art nerds in our community. These were just to show you how I would deconstruct a pose, but let's use Guerrero's pose here. Let's draw Spider-Man swinging a bat. I think that'd be kind of fun. So let's just say we're gonna push this pose. We're gonna really exaggerate it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the torso and I'm going to lightly block in what I want the pose to be doing. Now, Spider-Man has a much more tapered and much slimmer and muscular physique. Actually, appropriately, right in front of me is actually the Spider-Verse art book. So I guess I could use this as a little bit of inspiration. If I get stuck on like how to draw Spider-Man, I can use this to draw Spider-Man. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to still utilize the same kind of shapes and angles, but I'm pushing it a little bit. So I'm trying to match Spider-Man's physique, which is more narrow, more tapered, more lean, and I'm trying to match the same thing. And you can see that I'm still utilizing the same mentality and philosophy of it's stretched on one side and it's pinching on the other side. But I also noticed that his body is leaning way over. So when I'm drawing it, originally the torso was kind of balanced, and I realized like, oh, I can't have the torso be that balanced. I need it to lean more to the left. And then I'm gonna maybe block out like the head shape. Maybe we'll have it like here, and maybe we can even like push the shoulders a little bit. So I'm kind of treating this almost like a gesture drawing where I'm like blocking it in very quickly so I can get the overall proportions. And what I like to do too is that instead of drawing, like cleaning up the arm first, is I want to map out where the hands are going to be. So sometimes I'll map out where the hand and look at it like how it lines up with the head, so I know roughly where to put the hands, and then you build where the arms are afterwards. Now this pose itself is already quite exaggerated, so I don't know how much more I can really push it, but again, we'll do our best. Oh, also this is something that I didn't really quite notice, which is that the hips, the legs are angled upwards, or like that's how I mapped it out. Now physically maybe this is not how you want to hit a baseball, but I don't know, it might add a little bit of personality to the pose. So I'm kind of adjusting and changing things as we're going. Okay, we're drawing Spider-Man, so let's kind of have the head be like here. Okay, and then this is where you have a little bit of creative licensing, let's just say. So what this means is that you can kind of break away from what the pose is doing a little bit. So just because you got the deconstruction, you might kind of look at it and be like, okay, I've broken it down, I understand like where like the pose should be, how it should be done and all that. I have all like the necessary pieces to draw my character, but at the end of the day, it is the final drawing that you want to make sure it looks good, not that you captured it perfectly to the reference. So kind of like using the same kind of shapes, same poses here, but we're kind of trying to translate it to something new. Let's get the shoulder in. I feel like this is a big part of it. So this is kind of like my rough, let's say. And the bat position, let's change this. Let's have the hand. So he's holding the bat, I think, more like this. Based on the drawing, it feels like this is what's kind of happening. And to make him more cut looking, I'm gonna add a little bit of these bumps here for like the muscles. And this is just the rough. So like down the road, probably gonna, like, that's what the third section here is for. It's to kind of adjust and clean up the pose a little bit. And let's see, actually the body doesn't turn that much, so let's put it like here. Let's lower the torso a bit. So this is like I'm trying to balance what Guerrero is doing, but then also like what Spider-Man would maybe look like if he was doing the same thing. So there's a little bit of like improvisation, a little bit of kind of like changes here and there just to do it. Now, if you're following along or you're kind of like you want to try this out, you don't have to do Spider-Man. You can definitely do like a different character or a different pose. Even let's raise up the torso a bit, maybe. Let's shift the legs. So sometimes what helps is looking at the alignment of things. So right here, I can kind of see that this is where the head is, and I'll drop an anchored line. So this is something that's very helpful that I do a lot when trying to capture poses, is pay attention to where the head is in relationship to the rest of the body. So if I really want to get this kind of momentum and this swing, what I'm noticing is like, oh, the body is like pushed way over. So let me see if I can push that even more. Like push the body way over and have it be more like here maybe. And I'm just kind of slowly chipping it in, slowly chipping away like the shapes and the forms of the body. Now Guerrero is wearing like armor and everything, so whenever you're using video references in this way, don't get too caught up by all the details. The proportions might be different, so it's hard to necessarily be like, oh well, if it looks odd and someone goes like, oh, it looks a little bit odd, maybe like the arm is not shaped that way, or maybe it's not that big, and then you show the people like the reference, and then they go like, yeah, the arm doesn't bend that way, and it's like, okay, but in the reference, that's what I see this bump. Keep in mind that the bump there might be different because the person is just either the physique is different or they're wearing clothes that changes the look of it a little bit. The goal is not to try to draw out a one-to-one replica. You're utilizing what the person is doing and all like the necessary information, like again, remember where it's stretching, where the pinch is happening, and also the balance. So looking at the head and where it kind of lands and paying attention to like how you can use those to your advantage to build the pose. So This is kind of like the main takeaway of how to do this. If you want to become a better illustrator and find our tutorials helpful, the easiest thing you can do is hit that subscribe button. When you subscribe, you'll get to vote on what we draw next in our weekly polls, and if you hit that bell, you'll know whenever we go live. So you can start learning with us completely free. So I noticed like the foot is more closer to the center. So I'm like, okay, let me reposition the foot so it matches that kind of the centering of the pose. So in this case, I might make the foot just a little bit longer, just so that it matches the pose a bit more. It takes a little bit of practice. I'm gonna shrink the head just because I was like, I feel like his head was getting maybe a little bit too big, or might reposition it just so it matches the pose a little bit better. So this version is the cleanup. So this is like the final version. Now Miles is a little bit lankier. What is kind of also helping me right now is that I have the Spider-Man art book in front of me, and so I'm kind of using that to really help me understand how to draw like Miles's proportions. And I'm gonna kind of maintain his more thinner physique. He's much thinner than Peter is, just bulk, because I guess he's a bit younger and everything. And also I think a good thing to keep in mind is to try to not make him too muscular. I feel like sticking with simpler shapes and simpler lines would be good. So when it comes to drawing hands holding something, you really want to make sure that the hands are bending and kind of moving in the way to accommodate for the object that they're holding. So don't have the hands just kind of hold things regularly, but try to have it match how it might like rebalance itself to hold an object. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do here, is I'm trying to like map out like where the pinky would be in order to hold the bat. Guerrero's chest looks like it's bending this way. Now, if you're kind of like, oh, Josh, how do you know Guerrero's chest, or like the angle of the chest is this way and not like the other way? And that's because if I look at the logo on the chest, again, always look for context clues. The context clues for the logo is telling me that it's kind of bending this way. I think he gives Miles a little bit of like an indication of like hips and legs. So we're just gonna add a little bit, but not too much. Oh, his legs are like sticks. The carrot legs, where it's like very, 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 very thin. So a little neat trick is that a lot of the times the lower leg is slightly longer than the upper half of the legs. So your calf that calf area from the knee to the ankle is usually a little bit longer than the thigh area. That just makes your characters look a little bit taller. So if you've ever like, oh, I want to make my characters look taller and a little bit more elegant, how do I do that? You usually want to do that by making the calf or like the knee area to the ankle a little bit longer. The artist I referenced was Jesus Alonso Iglesias. He has this amazing way of bringing life and personality to his character art in a way that just feels expressive and natural. I wanted to capture that in my drawing, and so a lot of the shapes, the line work, and how Spidey's suit is colored was very much inspired by him. The light grays, the line works, the way that some parts are kind of left white and empty, that's very, very much taken from how he has it in the Spider-Man art book. So if you want to check out his work, feel free to. It's really great inspiration, and I definitely used it basically to kind of make it feel like I drew a pose that can perfectly fit inside of the art book as well. You might have heard of the notion that tracing when doing art is a big no-no. But here's the thing, it's totally okay to trace over images to learn, and as long as you don't call the traced piece of work your own, it's all good. If you stick to that rule, then tracing is a-okay. You see, the benefit of tracing over reference images is that you take away the need and the pressure to have a really well-drawn piece at the end. I like to think of it this way. When we do a study where we have an image on the side, I like to call that an observational study. But when we trace over the reference, I like to call that a tracing study. An observational study has you juggling three things: your observational skills, how you are translating your observations onto your study, and how the final image looks as you show it to people. A tracing study, however, you only have to worry about one thing: tracing on top of the reference. What this approach does is it allows you to practice a specific technique you're trying to understand with very low pressure and low stakes. So tracing over a reference image is perfectly fine because it's a way to learn and understand how a technique works without the need to manage a proper drawing at the end. For example, did you just learn about the arm anatomy? Great, grab an image of an arm and map out the muscles on top of the reference image. And that is exactly what I'm doing here with my reference images. I'm tracing the reference to extract and figure out what the pose is if we were to simplify it into just a stick figure. Well, if you made it this far, we hope that you learned something new and that it helps you get better. And if you want to keep this momentum going, what better way than joining an amazing and supportive community that's got your back? If you want to connect with a community of art nerds from around the world who are on the same journey as you, join the Wing Canvas Discord. It's a space where you can share your drawings, get real feedback, and hang out with us. Here's a couple other videos you can check out next.